Greetings, salutations, respect, and love. I am Scott, and you are in the Prog Corner, where today we are talking about great bands that only put out one record and then called it quits, said, peace out, I'm outie 5000. And, if you think about the history of rock music in general, there's been quite a few, but not as many as you would think, right? I mean, Jeff Beckley, Lauryn Hill, the Laws, the Unicorns, Sex Pistols, the Monks, the Shags, the Germs, Blind Faith, Derek and the Dominoes, Postal Service, the Modern Lovers, United States of America, Minor Threat, Them Crooked Vultures, Temple of the Dog, Mother Love Bone. It's just ridiculous how many there were. But, none of the really big names just put out one record, right? What about in the prog sphere? Well, as I was putting together a list of 25 great prog bands that only put out one record, I noticed a lot of these bands actually 20, 30, sometimes 40 years after the fact would go back and drop a second album. There's a whole lot of those. So what we're talking about are bands that only put out one record in their original incarnation. A lot of these bands actually did record more material and never released it, or stuff was released way, way after the fact. And like I said, as I'm putting together these list of prog bands that only put out one record, over half of them were Italian. I mean, it's just amazing. I think I only included 5 Italian bands in my list of 25, but the ones I did not include: Elucephalix, Blocco Mentale, Buen Vecchio Charlie, Campo de Marte, Celeste, Cerveo, Cherry 5, Sita Frontale, Corte de Miracoli, Didi Lind, Festa Mobile, Jacula, La Uovo di Colombo, Merple, Odyssey, Panafreda, Rocky's Fidge, Samadhi, Triadi, Uno. All those bands only put out one record. It's just amazing. But I'm doing the top 25 prog rock bands of all time that only put out one record in their original incarnation. And we're going to start it off in France with Arachnoid. They put out one album in 1979 and then disappeared, but I love it. Kind of feels a little like Carpe Diem or Shylock, with a little darker undertones, kind of King Crimson-y at times, but very, very cool, dark, atmospheric prog. Arachnoid, very awesome. At number 24, we're going to Israel and Atmosphera. This is a band formed in Tel Aviv in 1975, and they dropped their one and only album 2 years later called The Lady of Shalott. And there's a whole bunch of Shakespeare references and stuff on this record. It's very symphonic. It's actually really, really great. I wish they would have done more. At number 23, it's a band called Quiet Sun, and I've got the album cover there over my shoulder. This band came together in like 1971, didn't record anything. They disbanded. I guess Ray Manzanera went on to join Roxy Music, so they kind of put it on hold. They come back and they record Mainstream in 1975. Apparently this was originally part of a Ray Manzanera solo, the recording session. So he had a little extra time. So he brings some, people back in from the original Quiet Sun, rounded out by Brian Eno. A couple of these songs ended up on that great 801 Live album. But yeah, Quiet Storm, Mainstream, 1975, outstanding. At number 22, from the ashes of the nice, we've got Refugee. And that's a little unfair. It wasn't like, Keith Emerson went on to ELP and then Patrick Moraz joined up. It was a little more convoluted than that. Lee Jackson had formed a band called Jackson Heights. Brian Davison was in the nice also. So when Lee contacted Patrick Moraz about forming a new band, the first person he thought of was bringing Brian Davison back and kind of bringing the nice thing going on. They put out one record in 1974, and it's terrific. I really, really love it. They started working on a second album, but Patrick Moraz had gotten the call from Yes to join that band. So a second album from them never materialized. At number 21, we're going back to the UK with Fields and their incredible 1971 debut. Obviously, the only album that they did release. They were a three-piece band led by Graham Field, who had previously been in Rare Bird. After Fields folded, he went back to Rare Bird and did more work with them. Andrew McCullough had played with King Crimson on the Lizard album. After this band broke up, he went on and joined Greenslade, and they were joined by Alan Berry, who had played in a band called the Dowland Brothers, who also included Peter and Michael Giles, who we would know much better later on with King Crimson. So that's number 21, Fields. At number 20, it's T2 and their only album, It'll All Work Out in Boomtown. What a terrific record, 1970. This had a sidelong epic on it called Morning, one of the very first sidelong epics in our beloved genre. They were a three-piece band led by Keith Cross, Bernard Jinks, and Peter Dutton. Peter Dutton later on went on to join Gun. Apparently, there was a second album recorded and never released. It came out like 20 years later in 1992 called Second Bite. And then they dropped a couple more records in the 90s. But for all intents and purposes, their 1970 masterpiece is their only album. And what a great record it was. At number 19, bring on the Mellotrons, y'all. It's spring. Yeah, this was a five-piece band, and three of the members played Mellotron, so you kind of get an idea what they sound like just from that description. They put out one amazing album in 1971. There is a bootleg version of Spring 2. It was recorded. It was never released. Apparently, there's a vinyl Spring 2 with a Roger Dean cover. I've never seen it. I just read about it. That would be a really cool thing to add to the collection. But Spring, just amazing. At number 18, we're going to talk about Storm Corrosion. This was a one-off project from Steven Wilson from Porcupine Tree and Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth. And the music doesn't sound like either one of those two bands. Originally, they were going to include Mike Portnoy in this thing, but as they started writing music for it, they realized there's no need for drums here. I guess, they actually ended up using Gavin Harrison for what few drum parts were required, but what an amazing record. Atmospheric, melodic, very cool. We are all waiting for a Storm Corrosion Part 2, and that is for sure because the connection between Steven Wilson and Michael Ackerfeld go way beyond just, the Storm Corrosion stuff. Steven Wilson had produced 3 albums for Opeth, Blackwater Park, Deliverance and Damnation. I believe he mixed or engineered Pale Communion. So there's been a whole lot of shared work that these two guys have done. So we need another Storm Corrosion album. Absolutely. And number 17, it's America's Great Mirthrandir. Oh, yeah. Formed in 1973 in New Jersey. They put one record out called For You, the Old Woman, and I absolutely adore it. I love this band. I love that album. The lead singer is John Bislacki III, and I love his voice. This is a band that brings all the great sounds and timbres and textures of British progressive rock, brings it into an Americana setting, and it's just brilliant. Mirthrandir at number 17. At number 16, we're going back to the UK and Affinity. Affinity, oh yeah, on the Vertigo Swirl label. This came out in 1970. It's very pastoral. It's very peaceful. I really like it a lot. This was their only album, but they had a whole bunch of unreleased material. So later on, after they broke up, there was a lot of posthumous type of releases that came out. But the great Linda Hoyle on vocals, just amazing. This band met originally in the University of Sussex, and they formed the band and hired Linda and put out one amazing record. At number 15, we're going to Sweden, y'all. And Atlas, They were formed in 1974 in Malmo. Took them a few years to put out their one and only record called Bla Vardag in 1979. It is incredible. Yeah, you hear it Scandinavian prog because you do hear the Bo Hansen influence here with these guys, but you also hear a little Genesis, a little Camel. Boy, oh boy, what an unknown gem that record is. I really, really like it a lot. I don't know anything about them. I don't know what happened to them after they broke up, but they left behind one terrific record at number 14. Speaking about bands that disappeared into the ether after they put out one great record, it's Coto En Pel. These guys were formed in Valencia in 1976. They dropped one record called Holocaust in 1978, and it is absolutely incredible. It is dark and King Crimson-y. It's got the keyboards and the lush textures going on. It's just an amazing record that was completely unsung and unknown back in the 70s. And because of the revival of our beloved genre, progressive rock getting exciting again, there were a lot of reissues and people going back and finding, undiscovered gems. And this Coto En Pel album is definitely one of them. At number 13, we're going back to Italy and Alphataurus, their one and only album that came out in 1973. This band was from Milan, and wow, what a terrific record that one was. They actually released a second album in 1992, and then in 2012 there was another one, but for all intents and purposes that self-titled debut was the only thing they did before going on a very, very long hiatus, and I just love it. It's such a great album, one of my favorite Italian prog bands for sure. At number 12, it's the American band Yezda Urfa from Northwest Indiana, around the Gary area, I think. I guess some of the guys were originally from Chicago, and that's where they did their very few live gigs they ever performed. We're in the Chicago area, I guess. Later on in the 2000s, they had a couple, reunion concerts at, some prog festivals and whatnot. But this band, man, they released a demo album called Boris in 1975, and it's so lo-fi. You're just used to hearing prog rock with really slick production, And this thing is just sounding like it was recorded on a 4-track in a basement. I love it. They went out and recorded a second album called Sacred Baboon. It did not get released until 1989, when the great Greg Walker discovered them with his symphonic label and brought them back, like he did with several other great Ameriprog bands. Thank you, Greg. God bless you, Greg Walker. And God bless you, Rick Rodenbach, the lead singer for Yezda Urfa. That dude's voice is unlike anything I've ever heard. It's just amazing. I love Yezda Urfa so much. What a great band. Just crazy, insane. Yes meets Gentle Giant with all kinds of crazy Americanisms. I love Yezda Urfa so much. At number 11, kids, it's Islands from Switzerland and their one and only album Pictures from 1977. This thing comes replete with an H.R. Geiger cover. And man, if ever an album cover gave you a little inkling about the music contained therein, it is certainly this album. It's dark, it's scary, it's ominous. You got the wind instruments. You don't have a whole lot of guitar going on. It's just really dark and dismal, and I just love it. I sure wish there would have been a second record from Island, because it's just the one they put out is just mind-blowing. Oh, the top 10 is here, kids. And we're starting it out with number 10, and it's Semiramis. Yeah, formed in 1970 in Rome. These guys were just little pups, man. They were like 14, 15 years old when they formed the band. By the time they released their one and only album, Dedicato a Fraz, in 1973, they were still just little kids in high school. I don't know what happened to most of these guys, but I do know that Michelle Zarillo joined Il Rovescio della Medaglia after this band broke up. But wow, Semiramis, this album is so fantastic. So many ideas crammed into one song. And then the next song starts up, and how do they put that many ideas in that song? There's so many weird sounds and instruments. It's just crazy how much I love that record. At number 9, We're going to Canada and etc. This was a band from Quebec. I don't know if they were from Montreal or not, but I know they sing in French. Marie Bernard Page is the lead singer. And if you could imagine Gentle Giant with a female singer who's singing in French, you're probably not too far away from what this band sounds like. Their self-titled debut came out in 1976, and it is highly, highly, highly recommended. Very good stuff. At number 8, back to Italy with Locanda Delle Fate. You know, they put out a lot of material after they finally broke up. But their one and only album came out in 1977, so they were a little late in the golden era, but that album was called Forse le Luccioli non si amano più, and it is just one of the greatest Italian prog rock albums you'll ever want to hear. It's symphonic, it's beautiful, it's got those raspy Italian vocals that I just love so much. They released the second album in 1999, Homo Homini Lupus, not good. But then there was an EP called The Missing Fireflies, which dropped in 2012. That thing's worth checking out. Really, really solid. At number 7, we're going to South America, y'all, and Bacamarte. This was a Brazilian band formed in 1974. It took them 9 long years to put out Depois du Film. Their one and only record came out in 83, and it is just amazing. Talk about quality musicianship. The songwriting here is amazing, but the playing is even better. Wow, just amazing. Apparently, there was a second album that they recorded, and they finally dropped it in 1999 or something like that. I have not heard it. All I know is that one album from those guys is just incredible. Speaking about bands with one album, that's what we're doing today. At number 6, it's Maxophone. Oh, man, Maxophone is so great. Talk about quality musicianship. These guys were all classically trained, but they play jazz, fusion. They play like kind of vaudevillian circuit stuff on this record. There's no telling how far this band could have gone if they would have stayed together. Their debut album came out in 1975. Later on that year, they dropped the English version of that album, not nearly as good. Fast forward to 2017, they finally drop a second album, La Fabbrica delle Nuvole. And then the following year, their leader and keyboard player, Sergio Latuada, died. R.I.P. Sergio, just an incredible talent. Man, I love Maxophone. I get excited just thinking about it. At number 5, back to South America, y'all. Only this time we're going to La Argentina and Bubu. And their one and only album, Annabellas, which dropped in 1978. These guys were actually formed in Buenos Aires in 75, and they dropped an incredible masterpiece 3 years later, and we never heard anything from them again until 2018. They dropped a second album called El Eco del Sol, which was actually really good. But man, Annabellas, probably my favorite South American album that I've ever heard. I'm not going to pretend that I know a whole lot about South American prog. I've dipped my toe in it a little bit. I know a few bands, and the best thing I've heard off that continent is Bubu. You need to check out Annabellas. If you like King Crimson, you'll love Bubu. At number 4, it's Khan and Space Shanty. Steve Hillage is one and only outing with this band. He was joined by Nick Greenwood, Eric Peachy, and Dave Stewart in the recording of the Great Space Shanty, which came out in 1972. Apparently, they were working on a second album. The band fell apart, and a lot of that material ended up on Steve Hillage's first solo album, Fish Rising. After Khan's demise, Hillage went on to join Gong, and the rest, as they say, is history. But man, Space Shanty is so good. It's Canterbury, but it's really not. It's more straight progressive rock than Canterbury. It's just great. I love it. At number 3, a band I've been talking about a lot here of late. Again, I've got the album cover behind me there. If I knew my left from right, it'd be helpful. It's England and Garden Shed. Oh man, I love these guys. Garden Shed came out in 1977, and kind of like Locanda Delle over there in Italy. This was kind of like the last hurrah of the golden era of classic prog. This was very late in the game, 1977, so it didn't get nearly the attention that it deserved. It was on Arista Records over there in the UK, but they didn't support it. They didn't know what to do with a band like this. They actually had an EP come out a couple years prior to that called The Imperial Hotel, which the Samurai of Prague promptly covered the title track of that. But Garden Shed from 77 stands as their only album until 97. Last of the Jubilees comes out. And then 2017, they dropped an album called Box of Circles. Avoid that one at all costs. It's absolutely terrible. But Garden Shed is an absolute masterpiece for sure. At number 2, it's Cathedral, boys and girls. Oh, yeah, formed in 1975 in Long Island. Probably the most influential of all American prog bands. There would be no Anglo-Guard without Cathedral. There's so many bands that owe a debt of gratitude to this incredible group that released one album in 1978 called Stained Glass Stories, and it is just incredible. Obviously, these guys had been listening to British prog, but they took their own spin on it in a real non-linear fashion where the themes come and go and they weave in and out. Man, I love this record so much. Apparently, they reformed in 2007, dropped an album called The Bridge. I have not heard that. But then in 2020, right before leader Tom Doncourt's death, he released an album with the great Matthias Olsson, ex-Anglo-Guard, and they dropped an album called Tom Doncourt and Matthias Olsson's Cathedral. That record's really good. But, you know, we're talking about that one and only record they dropped in the 70s, Stained Glass Stories, Cathedral. Check them out. Just incredible. But there can only be one number one album prog band in the world. And do I have it up there? Yes, I do, boys and girls. Of course I do. It's Museo Rosenbach and Zarathustra, my favorite Italian album of all time, one of my top 10 favorite albums of all time. This record is incredible. This record is perfect. These guys were formed in 1971. The great Zarathustra was dropped in 1973. They were led by Stefano Gallifi. What an incredible voice that guy's got. But if you like mellotrons and chunky guitars and melodies that will stick to your brain forever, Museo Rosenbach just might be your band. They broke up shortly thereafter. Maybe the Mussolini controversy, you know, they had the image of Mussolini on their album cover. Maybe it didn't help at all, but they broke up and later on dropped a second album in 2013 called Barbarica, and that's actually really, really good. But, you know, we're talking about that one and only record they dropped in 1973, Zarathustra. Incredible. I love it. And that is my wrap up of one album prog bands, one little piece of bookkeeping. Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to mine from France who just sent me a couple CDs. Yeah, Psychonoia. The album's called Unreal Seas. And then Foreign, the Symphony of the Wandering Jew, Part 1 and Part 2. So I've got some listening to do. I listened to Part 1 of the Wandering Jew already. It's really good. Not my normal kind of prog, but hey, if you're sending me physical copies of your music, I'm going to be talking about your bands. Absolutely. Thank you so much for dropping this off, Ivan. I appreciate you. Best of luck in your musical endeavors. I will be listening to all 3 of these CDs. Thank you so much. Yeah, just drop me whatever you want. I'll talk about your band. Why not? Anyway, I am Scott. You are in the Prog Corner. I love you guys. Have a great day, and I will see you soon. Peace in the middle.